Hey, Doreen and Jeff. How are you?
Hi, Jeff. How are you?
Awesome, awesome. Hey, Jeff, I just want to make sure I can hear you. How you doing? You're on mute. Nope.
Good morning. How you doing?
Awesome, awesome. Great to have you. Great keynote. Before we get into it, what's the key takeaway? I'll start with you, Doreen, that you want folks to get from your session. To me, it sounds like time and people need to start automating quickly, but I'm just curious to know what your take is on maybe the one thing they could do in 2020 with this information you gave them.
Yeah, I think it's probably all about, personally, we all embrace the smartphones, the apps and whatnot, and we're very impatient when it comes to just simple things like ordering something off Amazon, and then you kind of want a confirmation right away, and you want it to come through Prime, and it has to be there like instantly. And to apply the same kind of methodology to business is just logical, and we do that in a way, but the strategy is kind of lag behind. So I guess that's what I was trying to convey with the whole mobility and the time aspect of it. And this is why I think automation really is so important, because it helps with a lot of that, as we know.
Absolutely. And Jeff, I love that slide of the aircraft carrier going, trying to turn. So, what are your thoughts on one key takeaway for folks from your session?
Yeah, I think you touched on it briefly. There is that what we see a lot of attention to that tactical move to automation. There's there's a belief. It seems as if there's a belief to, let's just automate. We can't go wrong if we automate something, and it's reminiscent a little bit of maybe 10 or 15 years ago when graphical interfaces were becoming more prevalent for dashboarding and things of that nature. And we used to talk to customers then, and they would say, we want a dashboard. We'd say, well, we'd ask them, what do you want on the dashboard? Who's going to look at the dashboard? What's the reaction going to be of people that are looking at that data? How accurate is the data that supports the dashboard? Are you sure you're ready to present that? And they say, I don't know, just give us a dashboard. And we see the same sort of thing happening from an automation perspective now, where customers are just saying they're under so much pressure. It's not a knock on them. There's so much pressure to automate that they just start running to automate whatever they see, and there's not this thought process, to go after it in a much more meaningful fashion. AI ops is the great topic, right? AI ops is this idea that we're going to automate things. Well, if you really do AI ops, you've got to look at the impact across the whole organization. It's got security implications. It's got self-service implications. It's got integrations. There's so much more to it than just tactical automating.
Hmm. No, it's a great point. It's just like functional automation. People just want to automate all their tests. So, with automation in general, though, is there like a rule of thumb that you tell folks to focus in on to start with? Or is it like risk based, or where do you usually focus on?
Yeah, there's no perfect answer to that. It goes back to that business strategy that I talked about in the presentation, that making sure that whatever it is that you're looking to automate will have the most impact. Whether it's impact financially, has a big ROI, or whether it's impact from a manual intervention perspective, or whether it's a risk associated with, if these things occur, we're at risk of some strategic outage or a compliance of some nature. So it's going to vary from customer to customer. That's why you've got to go through that process of having all the consumers, constituents involved to make sure that it's a well thought out approach, and we're not just automating what we think is best, but what we know will drive the best business value.
Absolutely. Doreen, any thoughts on that? Where people could start?
Yeah, it really depends, like what Jeff said. It really depends on the customer. I mean, no single customer is the same. So we work a lot with customers that, like in Europe, you call it like industry 4.0. So it's a lot about automating. And again, automation is one of these buzzwords. Um, Things on the manufacturing floor within industry, etc. So it really is hard to say. We've been asked that a gazillion times, and we're not a consultancy company. We're just a software vendor, but we've been asked that all the time. It's like, hey, what should we automate first? And it's like, well, what does your process look like? And that's where people like Jeff come in, where you try and partner up with someone that basically says, okay, we've got the experience from like so and so many customers in your industry, and we can give some advice as to what best practices would look like in your environment. But as far as we're concerned, we just basically ask them like what the current processes look like, and then we try and find like common sense, really. Like what are the low-hanging fruits? Because people are very, very difficult when it comes to like changing things in their environment, and you don't want to force that upon them with everything else that they have to do already. So you're trying to ease them into some of it. Then there is also the aspect of a lot of people being afraid that automation takes their job away. It might sound silly, but it is a given that a lot of people think that, hey, then, if all of this gets automated, what do I do? And so you have to basically convince them that all it means is that they have more time to do meaningful things. It's not going to go away. It just means that they can focus on what they should really focus on versus trying to get all this admin overload done, which is where automation plays a key role to take that out of the equation.
Yeah, actually, if I could chime in on that, that's an excellent point Doreen makes, is automation never ends either. Right. So just because you create initial automations of some sort, it doesn't mean you close up shop and walk away and people's jobs are at risk. The environment never stops changing. And so there will always be demand, new automations, new integrations, new things. That's never going to end.
Well, I guess the new concern here is before first wave was automation is going to take my job. Now it's automation with AI is going to take my job. So does AI make it more likely that someone's job's going to change, or you still see a lot of interaction still needed for AI ops to be successful once it's implemented as well?
I certainly, it's the same, right? Just it brings in a broader aspect of the enterprise. Is when you're looking at AI ops, it just includes more. It doesn't change any of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and in my eyes, what it all is about is generally like, and we all said it, I mean, the industry we all work in is dynamic in itself. So that means that no single day is going to be like the next day, so everything's always changing. Everything's always, or you're required to adapt anyway. So to me, people that work in the industry in general, whether they might realize it or not, are very, very used to a changing environment. It just might be the mindset that they have that's different. So nothing's going to go away. It's just going to change in a way that, in my personal view, it's going to be more meaningful. That's the best way to express it. Like, I know it, like for myself, the more we automate on different levels, the easier I can do my job. And this is the way I usually convey it to the people. When we go in and we talk to customers, I say, so what is it that you really do not want to do today? Like, and why are you doing it? Is the process behind it really necessary, or can this be automated? And a lot of the time it actually can be automated, and they're very happy afterwards. But initially just go, oh no, don't change my daily routine, because I just want to keep doing what I've been doing for the past 10 years, right?
Absolutely. Great advice. All right, let's get to the first user question. And they want to know, 1 second. All right, there appears to be an issue with my machine, but no problem. The question is, how do you escalate if an IT issue is not handled right away? Do you have an automated process in place?
I would assume this goes for us. And yes, I mean, there is the process really, again, is not always the same for every single customer, because there might be different requirements for the process with each individual customer. But in general, the way it's escalated is if there is like an issue and there's one person that's on call or that is responsible for looking at the issue at a given time, then that person would get it first. And usually there's a backup. Sometimes there's a third and fourth and fifth person before it gets escalated to management, before it gets initiated again in case no one responds. So the key aspect for us is that we want to make sure that nothing gets missed. So if no active acknowledgement, then we will try and get a human being on the line, on the email, on the SMS, on the app, whatever it is, that will acknowledge responsibility of that issue. This is the key aspect. And how the layers and the tiers are defined is different from customer to customer. That makes sense.
Absolutely. So Jeff, any follow-up or next question?
No, next question.
Awesome.
She
awesome.
nailed it. Yeah.
Great, Doreen. All right, so next question. I think I have the slide machine working now. They want to know, depending on the industry, companies may be under multiple compliance regulations. Is there a starting point that helps with all this?
Wow. Thanks, Rocky, for that one.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a tough question because there's a part of it that goes back to um, what we've been saying is that every customer is different. But what I would say, so as to not just avoid the question, is a basis that we see is around configuration management. It's from a compliance perspective, a lot of it is based on making sure that you know what you have, you know where it is, and you know what the disposition of that is. And from there, then you can address whatever the specific compliance issues are. You patch the right levels. Are you providing the proper access and denying the proper access, et cetera? But you've got to know what you have. And so configuration management is very difficult and it's very complicated. It gets into data models and automated discovery and accessing applications and being able to understand in complex hybrid IT exactly what your applications and your services look like, where are all the systems that make that up, how are they all interconnected. It's a big order, but that's where it begins, because if you don't know exactly what you've got, exactly where it is, and exactly what the disposition is, you cannot be confident in addressing anything associated with compliance. So configuration management, we spend a lot of time helping customers with this, but there's no silver bullet. It's very difficult, but that's what we're here for. And there are solutions out there that can certainly aid in driving towards proper config management.
Awesome.
Yeah, I would probably just add that come from the communication angle. So a lot of it is related to people and how to communicate and what their compliance issues are. So let's say for our HQ over in Europe, there's a lot of unions and a lot of stuff because that's in Germany, so there's a lot of data security and regulations and whatnot. So very different issue, because it doesn't matter so much what systems you currently have. The more important thing is what company regulations are in place, and that could span everything. But I agree with Jeff in that essentially with everything that you do, it doesn't matter whether you want to move to a different city or whether you just want to do something else. First, you assess what you have and what is it that you can still use, and what is it that you can optimize on. And then on top of that, it's about communicating things accordingly, and then trying to figure out who your key people are that can help with the change, because it is going to be a change of sorts, and the less it feels like a change, the more people will, or the faster people will adopt it, in my eyes.
Great advice. Okay, next question, user question. I think the slides say Rocky, but it's users are submitting it to Rocky and Rocky's submitting it through Slido. So just a heads up there. User question is, do your customers complain about cost in a myriad of different systems that they need to manage?
They actually do, which is why I brought it up, because they say, well, they've got all these different systems, and now we can take any kind of event. So it doesn't really matter. It can come from IT, but it could also come from like process control, manufacturing execution systems, or security cameras, you name it. So it could be anything that can generate an event. And all of these systems historically have one way or the other of sending some event out. So what we have seen a lot with customers, and this is where they come to us and then complain about the current setup, is that they say they have this little silo solution here and this little thing here, and none of which really does everything the way they want, but they're managing all of it somehow. So it inevitably results in high maintenance and costs for them. And we have been like if you want, like the layer that sits on top more often than not, because that's where we usually come in, and then we say, okay, well, we got this option. We can talk, we can sit, we can talk about things, and we can see how we can take all these different events and then basically just do certain workflows, and you just need to manage this one platform, and that will significantly reduce the costs, not only of managing, but also of the time it takes for the message to actually reaches the person that can do something with it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Jeff, any thoughts around cost?
No, I think Doreen addressed that.
Awesome. Okay. Next user question. They want to know, what kinds of things are you seeing regarding AI ops? It's a hot topic right now. So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, and I touched on this a little bit earlier. There's this jump to quick tactical automation that we are seeing, and again, that's fine. But what we would say is AI ops is much more comprehensive than just automating for the sake of automating, and it's making sure that there's a process associated with it. It's interesting when you look at the search. I can't take credit for it. Our CTO Alex Ulbrich did some research on Google Analytics, and you look at what people are searching for, and you put some common things from an IT perspective in there: service management, operational management, DevOps, etc. And AI ops rockets to the top of the list. Everybody's interested in it. And so, of course, when that happens, it starts to become a buzzword inside of an enterprise IT shop, and everybody starts to react to that. And so we see a lot of movement to automate, but we haven't seen the maturity from a process perspective and from a cross-organizational perspective engagement model. So everybody just jumps to automation, and they think they're making progress, and they very well could be, but are they making progress on the right things? That's the real question. And is there a better way? Because at the end of the day, what might happen is you get through a year or two of doing a number of automations, you look back and say, what are we getting for this? And there may be some value, but could it have been significantly greater? And in some cases, maybe there is no value derived because there's an assumption. We think we know what we need to do, but you know what happens when you assume. So I think that's the trend we're starting to see. Lots of attention, lots of interest, but still some tactical movements and not as strategic as we think it should be. I think we are starting to see steps in that direction from some of our customers. We have some customers that are very mature and are in fact starting to look at this from a more strategic perspective, and that's good.
great. Next question, Doreen, do you want to jump in?
No. I'm gonna. That is perfect. I mean,
Awesome.
It's exactly like Jeff said.
Perfect. I love that. All right, next question then is this for you, Doreen. Ever missed a critical alert?
Myself? Oh yeah. That's because that's of course before. No, but I mean, there is no guarantee, which again I don't like to assume. So a little more detail to the question might have helped, but I'm going to try and then give it my my best guess. I mean, can you guarantee that there is like 100% availability? And have I ever missed something? Of course I have. Right? And this is where this all comes from. And we all have one way or the other. But the goal really is the same like with automation, what you're trying to do, and this is part of the communication automation area, what you're trying to do is you're trying to reduce the issues that you face in the sense that you maybe get almost all alerts and then you just miss the occasional one for whatever reason. But that's again why you have a fallback. That's why you have a backup or why you have different communication channels. So best example for me always is that, and it happens more often than not, that I'm on call for certain issues, not so much technical issues, but I'm on call, I'm available over New Year's. New Year's is the one time a year where everyone sends a message to everyone that he knows to wish them a happy new year. So all the services, all the push services, all the text messaging services, all the voice services are largely overloaded. So the chance of you missing something is very high. So how do you go about that? And so we've tried to experiment with that so that I wouldn't get delayed information sometimes, etc. And this is why the product is so mature and why our customers like working with us, because we'll always try and take it a step further. So we talk about automation, we talk about AI, we talk about machine learning and all of that. So the logical consequence always is that you talk to the people you work with, the people that have the issues, that approach you, that utilize your product, and then you basically take that and try and follow them through their day and see the issues and take it a step further, anticipate what will happen next. There is this other occurrence that might get things delayed, or we have a customer, let's say, that drives around to have engineers that drive around across the countryside, and for them it was always about email, so they checked their Blackberries at the time all the time, and then email, but they were driving at the same time, they were alone in the car, so how much of an email can you really read while you're driving? So all they needed at that point was a different communication channel like voice, to basically just push a button in the car and say, hey, yeah, read the message to me, and then they could decide whether they wanted to stop and pull over or not. And so, yes, you do miss your alerts, and probably that will never be fully like 100%, but the idea is to get as close as possible, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I would tack on to that, because having that same philosophy, it's very dangerous, right, to think that you can catch all of the events that are occurring that ties to that alerting mechanism, right? They're all right? The communication that comes from alerts starts with some event that feeds that. And it's very risky to assume that you can put monitoring in place and management in place of infrastructure and applications and catch everything. You can't, because in many cases, you're putting monitoring in place based on what you know today, but you can't know everything. You can't anticipate every possible scenario, especially given the hybrid IT environment that companies are working, enterprise IT is working in today. And so being able to predict all the possible outages or events that could occur that you need to alert on, you just can't. You're going to miss. But over time, you learn and you add and you improve and you get better. But there will always be something that you just didn't predict. It's just too complicated.
Absolutely. And Jeff, you just mentioned a term. This is what I love about hosting conferences. I'm learning as well. Hybrid IT. The past 2 days, I've been hearing more and more about hybrid IT. I didn't know this was an issue. What kind of complexity is this bringing up? Because I think both you and Doreen mentioned it in your keynote.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's a good one. I think there's sometimes some of these new ideas that come out, it's not just in IT, it's in anything, but this idea that, we're just going to move everything to the cloud and our lives will be better. We can just put it in the cloud. It's cheaper, it's faster, it's somebody else's problem. And it just doesn't work that way. So what it's really created is a number of challenges. The first one is that when the cloud first started to become prominent, and whether it was IT itself or just shadow IT, right? Folks in the business being able to deploy things very easily. You just go out, swipe a credit card. You've got a workload that you can move to a data center that belongs somewhere else, and it's pennies per minute. Sounds cheap and it sounds easy. And the enterprise IT organizations that we work with, when we first started to talk about this several years ago, said, yeah, that's not our problem. We are responsible for internal IT, not the things that go into the cloud. But then a year later, they would call us and say, yeah, remember when I told you it wasn't our problem? It's our problem now. So all of a sudden, they're trying to manage all of this infrastructure that they didn't deploy. They didn't set security policies. They didn't have anything to do with it, yet they're supposed to make sure that it's functioning, it's compliant, it's secure. It makes it really difficult when people are deploying workloads out into multiple clouds, right? It's not just Amazon. Everybody, all the big vendors, Oracle and Google and Microsoft and so on and so forth, all have clouds. And so they're easy to deploy to. And ultimately, even if corporate relationships build those, they ultimately build out multiple cloud providers that they have a relationship with, because they've got Microsoft relationships, they've got Oracle relationships, they've got Google relationships, et cetera, et cetera. So it's that blend of infrastructure that resides in your data centers and also resides someplace else. Some you have good visibility into and some you don't. And it creates a number of challenges for enterprise IT.
Absolutely.
And we've had, and absolutely right. I mean, we've had customers, and it's really a philosophy question, maybe. I don't know if you want to call it that, but we've had customers that came to us and said, well, we want, regardless of where everything resides, we want everything in the cloud. So, because we believe that the availability in the cloud is better. And then we had customers that came back to us and said, yeah, been there, done that. We want it on-prem because that did not work. And it kind of resonates with what Jeff just said, because you do not know how they're running things. You might be signing a contract and guarantees you a certain amount of 99% availability or whatever. But is this really going to be the case or not is another question, because you just brought a third-party provider in, and it's a mind shift. I think the path is still set, but it's we're all learning in the process, and this is why the whole hybrid aspect is so complex. Also, when you think about outside of just pure IT, so if you do not think just data center, but you think IT that supports manufacturing, for example, a lot of the tools that they have are on the plant floor, so they're on site. And some of them can communicate to wherever. So, things residing in the cloud, that's fine. And it can be monitored. It can be hooked up with something else, but others cannot. And so there is this complexity right now where you have like legacy, you have this new world, and you're trying to marry the two. And it sounds easy because, just, put it on someone else's desk. They're going to take care of it because they're ultimately responsible for it because I'm paying them for it. But if you have an issue, then what's going to happen next? Like if you cannot, if they did not deliver, or if something else went wrong, etc. So we all need to get our head around that, I think.
Great advice. Okay, next question. And you want to know, I think you touched on this a little bit already, but what are other customers saying about the move to automation, the good, the bad, and the ugly?
Yeah, I'll take a first pass at that. I think it's the good is that there's technology today that allows for automation in a number of ways. There's orchestration tools, there are automation tools, there are chat bots and chat ops, and there's all sorts of really exciting things that are driving, better self-service from a help desk perspective, all the way through automated builds of infrastructure. You can press a button now and have a server in minutes, as opposed to what used to take weeks, in some cases more, maybe down to days if there were really, crackerjack IT organizations, but now just down to minutes to be able to provision systems and be able to get up and running. And so that's exciting that the technology is there. It by itself, though, probably creates the bad and the ugly, because it's easy to provision and make mistakes. It's easy to create deploy infrastructure and services that become more shadow IT, if you will, and that creates problems from a security and compliance perspective. It creates asset management challenges, which can lead to chargeback problems. It opens up a whole new set of challenges that have to be addressed. So if you're not cautious and you open up automation too much, you're now creating your self-inflicted wound. And so that's what I would suggest. It kind of goes back. It's a little bit of repetition, but to say this is where having proper processes, proper governance, et cetera, is required, and not just look at automation and AI as a tactical initiative.
Yeah, and just to chime in on that, I think the good definitely is that we can advance in optimizing how we perform, I would call it, because automation helps with that. And the bad and the ugly probably really boils down to that it's a different way of doing things, in a sense that some of them really need to be contemplated carefully, because like what Jeff said, they can have other impacts, and that might not be everyone's cup of tea, if you like. So because it's a different way of working. But essentially what automation does for you is it frees up time. And with that come certain thought processes and general processes that can kind of inflict other wounds. But from everything that we've heard, even and we've had that too, and I'm sure, Jeff, you've had one or the other customer that tried something in automation and then need to revise it, and we've definitely had that. And usually, even if things did not go down 100% in the first try, they always said that the ultimate output was positive. So I think it's just like with everything, you automate more and more. I remember times where you still had paper tickets. Now everything's electronic, so that's automated. Then now you have your smartphones, you have this, you have that. So it's just a way of this is where things are going, and you're going to address the bad and the ugly as you move along.
Great advice. Okay, I think we only have time for one more question. So last question, and it's from Chris. Chris wants to know, speaking of alerts, have you had issues convincing teams to trust alerts? Or did you get too much of the attitude, works fine for me, or, that alert is just broken or flaky?
Yes and no. So it depends on where a team stands at the time we talk to them. So generally, what we do is we make sure we filter through noise and make alerts meaningful. That means that when you do receive an alert, you have to look into it. It's different to when you open your inbox in the morning. And again, it's a mindset that changes here, because you might be used to seeing everything from every single event source all the time, and you want to have the control of filtering through it, in which sense you have control over it. But what if there's just too much going on, which is what a lot of customers have told us, it's just too much going on. They can't handle all of this, and they might actually be too blind to see the one thing that's important. So this is exactly what we help with. So all of our customers actually attest that this has definitely changed the way they work with alerts, because they know when they do get it, they need to do something about it, to the point where we had customers that were on call and they did not want to go into, it sounds really stupid, but they didn't want to go into the shower because they were afraid that they would miss an alert, because it was just email push. So they basically had to have the phone with them all the time and then look at their emails. And the simple solution to that was we just set up a voice call. And so they heard the phone ringing because that one guy really put it on loud so he could go in the shower. And so his life just got a lot more relaxed. Or other people that say, hey, I'm on call over the weekend and I don't want to sit in front of my desk or in front of my laptop and just wait for something to happen. I want to be mobile. I want to be, spend quality time with the family. And so they know that they can go out and about, because they know if something really happens, they'll get it. Does it take a change of mindset? Does it take time? Yes, because you need to get used to it, because you will still be checking stuff. And people also told us that they went like, oh, we're checking all the time because we don't know if the system's really working. But this is like right? This is like our brand. This is like what we preach, where we say we make sure that this is the case. So awesome. Yeah, yes and no.
Yeah, and I would just chime in just as I did earlier, right? So Durdak's got the great technology to help from a suppression perspective, but they also take feeds from systems that can help with that too, right? So they're not getting fit. So Durdak is not taking sort of junk in to try and suppress, but you should also suppress things in your event management system as well through event correlation and other technologies that exist in the Micro Focus suite. So there's a front end to that component as well that helps drive better accuracy associated with the alerting.
Awesome stuff. Thank you all so much for this session. It was really eye-opening for me, and I really enjoyed it. Before we go, any parting words of wisdom for the Vivid ITOM Days attendees? Doreen?
Ooh, words of wisdom. Like more than we already shared. No, I think, talking about automation, I think you guys are doing it right now. I mean, we're part of a virtual conference, which I think is great because you don't have to go somewhere and get your travel budget approved, and you can still go about your own things and listen to the recordings after. I think this is all great. But in general, I would just say be open-minded, like with everything in life. We work in such a great industry. There's all the new trends and there's all the stuff that people that do not work in our industry, they always look at me like with these big guys and like, what? That's already possible. And so we're part of, the forerunners here. And with that, we should be open-minded and not try and stick to a lifestyle that we've known forever, but embrace change in the sense that this change will help us be more productive and get a better quality of life. I think that's the essential word of wisdom that I have for everyone.
Awesome. Jeff?
Yeah, I think I'd say what I talked about in the presentation, which is this is a journey, right? So getting to this next gen ops or next ops is a never-ending pursuit. because there will always be new things. There'll be new challenges. There'll be new regulations. The economy will change. That you don't know what's coming, and so what you want to embrace is the idea that this is an ongoing challenge, and we're working to just stay one step ahead if we can. But there will always be new challenges to take on, and we just have to have the right mindset and the right methodology, the processes in place to be able to maintain pace with that.
Awesome. I want to thank you again for sharing your knowledge, taking time out of your busy day to share with us. I think it's really going to help folks in 2020. So thank you so much for your sessions and what you did today. Thank you.
Thank
Most
you.
welcome.
Cheers.
Cheers.